The mop bucket rattled as Elias pushed it down the hallway, water sloshing dangerously close to the rim. The lights on the executive floor dimmed automatically as he passed, motion sensors clicking on behind him like quiet footsteps. It was past 10 p.m. The building was supposed to be empty. A sharp voice cut through the silence. "Don't raise your voice," a man hissed from behind a glass office door. "Do you want the cleaners to hear?" Elias slowed without stopping. His hands tightened on the mop handle. Another voice replied, lower, strained. "If this ever comes out, we're finished, all of us." Elias kept walking. The mop glided over the polished floor in steady strokes. He did not look up. He did not pause long enough to be noticed. But every word settled into his mind, clear and permanent. By morning, no one would remember he'd been there. That was how it always was. To most people in the building, Elias wasn't a man. He was background noise. The quiet janitor who came in when real work was done and left before credit was given. People talked around him, over him, sometimes through him, as though silence meant absence. "Just leave it," a woman once said sharply when her coffee spilled near his feet. "He'll clean it." He had cleaned it. He always did. Elias worked nights because nights spoke more freely. During the day, people wore faces. At night, they removed them. Ties loosened, heels came off. Voices dropped, then rose. Secrets slipped out in hallways, stairwells, and offices with glass walls people forgot were see-through. On his third week at the company, Elias learned that Mr. Caldwell from finance was moving money that didn't belong to him. Caldwell had laughed softly into his phone, pacing while Elias emptied trash bins nearby. "They'll never trace it," Caldwell had said. "By the time they do, I'll be gone." Elias tied the trash bag, nodded politely when Caldwell glanced at him, and walked away. 2 months later, he learned that the HR director was altering employee files to protect certain managers. He heard it while scrubbing a sink in the women's restroom. "If she reports it, terminate her," the director said calmly over the phone. "We'll say performance issues. I'll handle the paperwork." Elias rinsed the cloth. He remembered the voice. He remembered the name. The building spoke to him every night. People cried where they thought no one could hear. They argued viciously, said things they would never put in emails. Elias learned who hated whom, who was cheating on their spouse, who was afraid, who was desperate. He learned which smiles were fake and which apologies were rehearsed. No one asked him his name. One evening, a young intern lingered by the elevator, eyes red, hands shaking. "They're saying I lost the file," she whispered into her phone. "I didn't. I swear I didn't." Elias stood 3 feet away, polishing the elevator buttons. He knew who had deleted the file. He had heard the supervisor brag about it the night before. "She'll take the fall," the man had said, chuckling. "Always do." The intern glanced at Elias, then looked away, embarrassed to be seen crying in front of a janitor. The elevator doors opened. She stepped inside. Elias watched the doors close. Night after night, the secrets piled up. Not in a notebook, not in recordings. In him. Names, dates, phrases people repeated when they thought no one was listening. He didn't collect them out of malice. He didn't plan anything at first. Silence had been his armor long before this job. When he was younger, speaking cost him more than it ever gained. "Hey, clean this up," a voice snapped one night. Elias turned to see Mr. Randall, a senior operations manager, pointing at a stack of papers scattered on the floor. "They fell when you passed," Randall said without looking at him. He knew he hadn't touched them, but he knelt anyway, gathering the papers carefully. Randall leaned closer to a colleague and lowered his voice. "Too late. If this audit happens, we're dead. The numbers won't hold." Elias stood with the papers in his hands. He met Randall's eyes briefly. Randall didn't see a threat. He saw a mop. Put them on my desk, Randall said, waving him off. He did. As weeks passed, the building began to feel heavier. Not physically, morally. He could feel it in the way conversations stopped too late, in the nervous glances when someone realized he was closer than they thought. One night, as he cleaned the executive lounge, two men entered, arguing. "You promised this would stay buried." "It will. The janitor's right there." They both looked at Elias. Elias didn't look back. They laughed. "See?" the first man said. "Invisible." The word stuck. Invisible. Elias went home that night and sat in the dark of his small apartment, still in his uniform. He didn't turn on the light. He replayed the laughter in his mind. He wondered briefly what would happen if he spoke. Then he stood, folded his uniform neatly, and prepared for another shift. The accusation came on a Tuesday. He was called into a small office near security just after midnight. A man he'd never spoken to before sat behind the desk, hands folded. Property was missing from the executive floor, a tablet. "You were scheduled there last night." Elias slowed slowly. "Yes." "Did you take it?" "No." The man sighed as though disappointed. "We have a statement." "From who?" The man hesitated. "From management." That was all it took. By morning, whispers followed him the way silence used to. Security watched him more closely. His access card stopped working on certain floors. People who had never noticed him before now avoided his eyes. One woman he recognized, one whose secrets he had protected, looked at him and looked away. Elias stood in the supply room later that night, staring at the rows of identical mops and bottles. His reflection stared back at him from the metal cabinet door. For the first time, he felt the weight of everything he knew pressing against his chest. They had spoken freely because they thought he didn't matter. Now they were ready to let him fall because he mattered even less. Elias closed the cabinet slowly. The building was quiet, but it was no longer asleep. By the next night, the building treated Elias differently. Not openly, not loudly, but the way people treat something they've already decided is guilty. Security nodded less. Supervisors watched more. Conversations stopped when he entered a room, then restarted in hushed tones the moment he passed. The same hallways that once spilled secrets now felt tight, guarded. Invisible had turned into suspicious. Elias was called into another office, this one larger, colder. Mr. Randall sat there, arms crossed, jaw tight. The same man who had once joked about audits while Elias cleaned at his feet. "Do you understand the seriousness of this?" Randall asked. "Yes," Elias said quietly. Randall leaned back. "A tablet doesn't just walk away. Someone took it." "I didn't," Elias replied. Randall's eyes flicked over him. Uniform, shoes worn thin, hands rough from chemicals. The judgment came quickly. "You were the only one on that floor," Randall said, "and you've been around. A lot. Around, like dirt, like dust." "I clean where I'm assigned," Elias said. Sart Hadeles scoffed. "We're reviewing your employment. Until then, your access is limited." Elias nodded. There was nothing else to say. As he left, he heard Randall's phone vibrate. Randall glanced down and smirked. "Relax," Randall said into the phone. "It's handled." Handled. That night, Elias cleaned the lower floors. Cubicles, break rooms, restrooms, places where people still talked because they didn't think anyone important would hear. He heard them talk about him. "Did you hear about the janitor?" someone whispered near the vending machines. "Figures," another replied. "You never really know those people." Elias wiped the counter slowly, his knuckles white around the cloth. Those people. Near midnight, he found the intern again, the one who had cried by the elevator weeks before. She sat alone in a conference room, laptop open, eyes dull. "They terminated me," she said suddenly, not looking up. Elias paused. "They said I was careless," she continued, "that I lost sensitive files." Her voice cracked. "I didn't." Elias knew. She finally looked at him, and for the first time, she really saw him. "I'm sorry," she said quietly, "about what they're saying about you." He nodded once. "I'm sorry about you, too." She gave a tired smile. Funny, isn't it? Or the easiest to blame. When she left, Elias stood alone in the conference room. He stared at the long table where executives sat during the day, confident and untouchable. He remembered their voices at night, fearful, greedy, careless. He remembered everything. The suspension notice came 2 days later. No hearing, no investigation he was allowed to see, just a printed paper slid across a desk. Until further notice, the HR director said calmly, hands folded, the same hands that had altered files, the same voice he'd heard ordering someone's termination months ago. "You may collect your things," she said. Elias looked at the paper, his name spelled correctly, the accusation typed neatly. "May I ask who reported me?" he asked. Her eyes flickered, just for a second. "That's confidential," she replied. Of course it was. Elias walked through the building one last time as an employee. His cart rolled behind him, empty now. He passed offices where laughter had once spilled, where confessions had been whispered. Doors stayed closed. At the exit, the security guard hesitated. "Hey," the guard said softly, "for what it's worth, I don't think it was you." Elias met his eyes. "Thank you." Outside, the night air felt heavier than the building ever had. Elias walked home slowly. Every step echoed with the question he'd been avoiding for months. Why stay silent? At home, he sat at his small table and stared at his phone. He didn't open any apps, he didn't call anyone. He simply thought. He thought about the intern packing her desk, about the woman whose marriage was a lie, about the money that disappeared while honest workers struggled, about the laughter when they called him invisible. And he thought about the tablet. He knew where it was. He had seen Mr. Randall slip it into his briefcase during a late night at the hall. Randall had panicked, pacing the office, muttering about audits and backups. Elias was there, emptying the trash. Randall hadn't even lowered his voice. Elias closed his eyes. Silence had protected him once. Now it cost him everything. The next morning, the building buzzed. An internal audit was announced, quietly, carefully. Emails marked confidential, meetings held behind closed doors. People smiled too hard, laughed too loudly. Elias watched from a distance. He wasn't inside the building anymore, but the building hadn't stopped speaking. An anonymous email landed in the compliance department's inbox, then another, then a third. Each one brief, precise, names, dates, times. No opinions, just facts. By the end of the week, Mr. Caldwell from finance was sweating through meetings. The HR director began snapping at assistants. Randall stopped laughing. Security escorted 2 men out of the building one afternoon. No announcement, no explanation. Elias stood across the street, watching through the glass. He didn't feel joy. He felt relief. The phone rang that evening. "Mr. Elias?" a woman's voice asked. "Yes." "This is corporate compliance. We'd like to ask you a few questions." Elias closed his eyes. The building was finally listening. If you're still watching and you want to see how this all unfolds, how silence turns into justice, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and drop a comment. The final reveal is closer than they think. Elias hung up the phone and looked out the window. The quiet janitor was invisible no more. The compliance office was nothing like the executive floors. No glass walls, no artwork, just gray cubicles and faces that didn't bother pretending. Elias sat in a small room with a recorder on the table, hands folded, posture calm. Across from him sat a woman in her 40s and a younger man with a laptop open. "Thank you for coming in," the woman said. "We know this is uncomfortable."
Must be accurate.
Elias nodded. "I'm used to uncomfortable." The man paused his typing. The woman leaned forward slightly. "We're not here to accuse you of anything. We want the truth." Elias looked at the recorder. "Then you should already know it." She didn't smile. "We know some things, not all." "Ask," Elias said. They did. They asked about nights, about who stayed late, about what he'd heard. At first, Elias answered carefully, Names, times, locations, nothing dramatic, nothing emotional, just facts. The man's typing grew faster. "And Mr. Randall?" the woman asked eventually. Elias met her eyes. He took the tablet. Silence. The woman exhaled slowly. "How do you know?" "I was there, like always." They exchanged a look. "Did you tell anyone?" the man asked. "No." "Why not?" Elias considered the question. No one ever asked. The recorder hummed quietly. By the time Elias left, the sun was setting. The building across the street glowed with office lights, but something had shifted. The place felt nervous now, like it knew it was being watched. Inside, panic wore suits. Randall slammed his office door shut and lowered his voice. Who talked? No one talked, the HR director snapped. These emails, whoever's sending them knows too much. Caldwell from finance rubbed his temples. This is about the janitor. Randall scoffed. He doesn't know anything. Caldwell's laugh was thin. You sure about that? The laughter died. Meetings multiplied. Whispers returned, sharper now, desperate. People checked hallways before speaking. They started noticing cameras they'd ignored for years. Elias watched from the outside, sometimes literally. He'd sit on a bench across the street, coffee cooling in his hands, and observe the people who once stepped over him without a glance. They looked smaller now. The intern called him one evening. I heard about the audit. Yes. She hesitated. They asked me to come back to clarify my termination. Elias closed his eyes briefly. I'm glad. She hesitated. Was it you? I told the truth, Elias said. That's more than anyone else did, she replied. Inside the building, the walls were closing in. The HR director was placed on leave. Caldwell's accounts were frozen. Randall stopped showing up early and started leaving late, eyes darting, shoulders tight. One night, Randall found Elias waiting in the lobby. You, Randall said, stopping short. Elias stood calmly. Me. Randall laughed too loudly. Funny running into you. It happens, Elias replied. Randall's smile faded. You think you're smart? I think I listened, Elias said. Randall's leaned in, lowering his voice. You don't know how this works. Elias met his gaze. I know exactly how it works. Randall's phone buzzed. He glanced down, face draining of color. Elias stepped aside. Have a good night. He watched Randall rush toward the elevators. The call came the next morning. We need you to come in again, the compliance woman said, with documentation. Elias arrived with nothing in his hands. I don't keep files. People gave me everything themselves. They played recordings, hallway cameras, timestamps that lined up too perfectly to deny. Randall's voice, Caldwell's laugh, the HR director's calm instructions. The room went quiet. This is enough, the woman said finally. Outside, security waited. Randall was escorted out that afternoon. No shouting, no speeches, just a stiff walk past people who suddenly found the floor fascinating. Elias stood near the entrance, unnoticed again, but this time by choice. Caldwell followed 2 days later. The HR director resigned before they could escort her. The accusation against Elias was withdrawn quietly. An email went out citing procedural error. No apology. Elias didn't ask for one. He was offered his job back. We'd like to reinstate you, the woman said carefully, with compensation. Elias shook his head. No. She blinked. No? I've already done my cleaning. He left the building for the last time just as the sun rose. People were arriving for work, talking about coffee, traffic, weekend plans. They didn't recognize him. That was fine. Weeks later, the building felt different, quieter, lighter, like something rotten had finally been removed. Elias walked past it without looking back.
The quiet janitor no longer needed keys.
Elias thought the story was over. That was the mistake everyone else had made too, believing consequences arrive all at once, loud and dramatic. In truth, they come slowly, like water seeping into cracks, widening them until structures fail on their own. 2 weeks after he walked away from the building, the first headline appeared. Nothing flashy, just a quiet report about an internal investigation, financial discrepancies, and pending legal review. Names weren't mentioned yet, but the company stock dipped anyway. Fear has a way of traveling faster than facts. Elias read it on his phone while sitting in a small roadside cafe. He sipped his tea and scrolled past the comments. Employees arguing, defenders denying, outsiders speculating. No one mentioned a janitor. Good. The intern called again, this time with excitement in her voice. They cleared my name, she said, completely. They offered a recommendation letter. I'm glad, Elias replied. I start a new job next week, she continued. Better pay, better people. She paused. I wouldn't have made it without you. Elias looked out the window. You would have, he said, just not there. She laughed softly. You're a strange man, Elias. I've been called worse. After they hung up, Elias sat quietly, letting the noise of the street wash over him. He had no uniform to fold now, no night shift to prepare for, just time. Time felt unfamiliar. Another week passed. This time the news used names. Mr. Caldwell was arrested for fraud and embezzlement. His face appeared on screens, no longer confident, no longer laughing. The HR director was named in a wrongful termination lawsuit filed by 3 former employees. Randall's name surfaced last, resisting longer than the others, until the evidence boxed him in completely. The stolen tablet was mentioned in court documents, recovered from Randall's home office. Elias closed the article. He felt nothing sharp, no thrill, no hunger for revenge. Just a quiet confirmation that truth, when left alone long enough, finds its way out. One evening, as he walked past the building again, someone called out to him, Elias! He turned. It was the security guard, the same one who hesitated at the door weeks ago. They're talking about you inside, the guard said, half smiling. People finally figured it out. Elias tilted his head. Figured out what? That you knew everything, the guard said, half smiling. People finally figured it out. That's good, Elias said. You could come back, the guard offered. Different position, better pay. Elias smiled gently. I don't belong there anymore. The guard studied him. You never did you? No, Elias agreed, but I served my purpose. He walked away before the guard could respond.
That merger agreement
Months later, the building
signed.
stood quieter than
Great
ever.
work on the negotiations,
New executives,
everyone.
new policies,
Let's celebrate
new
tomorrow.
faces that smiled carefully and spoke softly in hallways. The janitors who worked nights were treated differently now. People noticed them. They said hello. They lowered their voices. Elias heard this from a woman he met at the cafe whose cousin now worked there. They say it's haunted, she joked, like the walls remember everything. Elias chuckled. They do. He found work elsewhere, not cleaning floors, but maintaining systems. Quiet work, honest work, places where listening was considered a skill, not a weakness. Sometimes late at night, he would think about how close he'd come to disappearing under someone else's lie, how easily silence could have buried him. But he also remembered the choice. He hadn't exposed secrets out of anger. He hadn't spoken to be seen. He had simply refused to carry other people's sins on his back anymore. That was the moment everything changed. One afternoon, Elias passed a mirror in a shop window and paused. For a long time, he studied his reflection. Not the uniform, not the mop, just the man. Invisible, no longer. Inside the old building, a new orientation video played for new hires. Policies, ethics, accountability. Somewhere near the end, a line was added quietly. Everyone here matters. No one knew who suggested it. Elias walked on, and somewhere deep in that building, the floors stayed clean. Not because someone scrubbed them, but because people finally learned to watch their steps.
They never noticed the janitor until the building started cleaning itself. If this story held you till the end, take a moment to like this video. It helps more than you know. Subscribe if you want more powerful emotional stories like this, and drop a comment below. Tell us what you would have done if you were in Elias's place. Silence can protect you, but sometimes truth is the only thing that sets you free.